Good morning. Welcome to the Deep 404. Israel is having a crisis at the moment in terms of credibility around its reporting and the way in which it is dealing with hostages. There have been confirmed reports now that on October the 7th, and these reports confirmed by Israeli forces such as Israeli Air Force Colonel Nof Erez. I'm not going to go show the video here, but I'll include a link to the video. Him apparently confirming that yes, there was the very strong likelihood that the Israeli attack helicopters on October the 7th were responsible for many of the deaths of people at the rave. There's video footage. Again, I won't show that here, but I will include a link to where you can find that in the description of what is reportedly video footage from an Israeli attack helicopter firing missiles onto vehicles and people as they appear to be attempting to run and flee something. It's difficult to know what they're attempting to flee. The attack helicopters in the sky that were firing in their direction, perhaps, or Hamas fighters. As I say, it is difficult to know in that instance, and if this footage is correct, exactly what those people are attempting to flee. There's also reports by Israeli, I believe, like a sort of paramedic type person, that he witnessed tank and assault weapon attacks on Israeli kibbutzes by the Israeli Defense Forces themselves. Further, there have been reports coming out from Israeli sources that the 1,200 people originally reported as being murdered by Hamas forces on October the 7th, that those numbers may have been inflated by hundreds perhaps, and that many of the reported casualties in those first few days may actually have been Hamas fighters who were counted as being Israeli civilians who had been murdered. So with all of that as a backdrop, there is now a friendly fire issue engulfing Israel, where three Israelis who allegedly escaped from captivity, Yotam Haim, Talalka and Alon Shamriz, who reportedly had escaped from Hamas captivity, approached the military, the IDF, in the Gaza Strip, and they shot them. They were shot by their own Israeli forces, apparently because they were men of the age that they could have been Hamas, and so they were just shot outright, apparently without questioning of who they were. Had they been questioned, it seems they would have been able to relatively quickly convince them they were in fact Israelis. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Force in this case, is reportedly conducting an investigation into this, an internal investigation. Now, there have also been reports that a wider investigation is not going to be conducted by Israel into the October 7th Nova rave event, perhaps because the outcome and finding of that would be detrimental to the IDF. There are, again, reports surfacing of witnesses at the Nova Festival claiming that they were caught in a crossfire between Israeli police and IDF, and that in some cases at least, the victims were killed by friendly fire from these Israeli police and IDF forces and not killed by Hamas. Now, I'm not saying that all of them were killed by Israeli forces at all. I'm just saying that the story seems to be changing, and there seems to be verification for these changes coming from Israeli sources. This is not just Hamas or Palestinian people saying this, but there seems to now be verification of this coming from Israeli forces. And, you know, in any situation like this, you would like to be able to understand the truth of what has happened, because barbaric events are used in war to justify positions and to explain why things happen. Now, if those events that are given to you aren't correct, it's easy to mislead you into what is happening and why things are justified. Also, there is a report that one of the... Now, this, I can't corroborate this, it's just that I'm seeing a lot of reports about this popping up in social media, that one of the reports by an Israeli who purported to have been at the Nova rave event and saw Hamas fighters raping a woman, that has apparently now been discredited, and certain websites that were publishing that story have now removed that article, as allegedly the person who reported as being at the Nova rave has now been confirmed as not having been there on that day. That one may or may not be true. I don't know. I can't confirm it. I wasn't there. But as I say, there just seems to be a growing number of stories, articles, videos, interviews with Israeli people, indicating that what was originally told about the October 7th events may not have been completely factual. There may have been more to it, and there may have been a number of incidents where deaths of Israeli people may well have been due to Israeli forces on that day and not Hamas forces. Protests have begun in Tel Aviv now after this shooting of these 3 Israelis yesterday who reportedly escaped captivity, tried to contact the IDF forces and were shot by them. On top of this, we have, adding to this challenge for Israel, and you can see why people are questioning things that Israel is saying. Now, of course, people are questioning things that Hamas are saying, but there are these other events. At this stage, both independent and syndicated journalists, 64 journalists and media workers have been confirmed dead since October the 7th. 57 of them Palestinian, 4 Israeli, and 3 Lebanese. 13 additional to this, 13 journalists are reported injured, 3 journalists are reported missing at this stage, and 19 journalists are reported arrested. On top of this, there are reports of multiple assaults, threats, cyber attacks, censorship, and killing of family members. One example, I'll just read a little bit of this here, is that on November the 13th, 8 family members of photojournalist Yasser Qudsi were killed when their house in southern Gaza was struck by 4 missiles. This is reported by Reuters and The Guardian. The incident occurred 5 days after a November 8th report by Honest Reporting, a group that monitors what it describes ideological prejudice in media coverage of Israel. It raised questions about Qudsi and 3 other Gaza-backed photographers having prior knowledge of Hamas October 7 attacks on Israel. Now, major media outlets, including Reuters, rejected those claims that that Qudsi and these other Gaza-based photographers had prior knowledge. Reuters rejected those claims, and Honest Reporting, interesting name, subsequently withdrew the accusations, but its report prompted the Israeli Prime Minister's office to tweet that the photographers were accomplices in crimes against humanity. And Israeli War Cabinet member Benny Gantz went to say they should be treated as terrorists. 5 days after that, 4 missiles struck the home of Yasser Qudsi. He survived, but 8 family members didn't. Another hospital has reportedly been destroyed, Kamal Adwan Hospital. The reports that are coming out about what has happened there, if they are true, are horrific. If these reports are true. Now, again, I'm not there. I can't corroborate them, but there are, again, numerous reports coming out of atrocities occurring around this hospital. Now, this is just another hospital in the Gaza area that has now been damaged, destroyed, rendered useless, and people are speculating that the reason that there have been so many hospitals attacked by the Israelis in this conflict since October the 7th has been not because there may have been Hamas fighters in the hospitals, but that by destroying these hospitals, they're effectively rendering those areas uninhabitable afterwards. So by destroying the infrastructure, the hospital, the water, the power, all of the internet has been disabled throughout all of Gaza again today. By doing these sort of things and destroying infrastructure like hospitals, pediatric hospitals have been destroyed, the oncology hospitals have been destroyed. It makes it very difficult for people to return to those areas, because if you're returning to an area where water, sanitation, hospital, and all of that is no longer in that area, you're effectively returning. You've jumped back decades in time in some respects in your standard of living and how you are going to then live in that area. If you get sick, you don't have a hospital to go to. If you don't have working sewage and sanitation, people are going to become ill. So some suggestions are that these hospitals are being attacked not because of perhaps the story of Hamas fighters being in these hospitals or weapons being stored there, but a deeper, more strategic reason being that it makes the area uninhabitable afterwards. Now, just in a little bit of what's going on around the area. The Houthis, Sami Abu Zuri, sort of a spokesperson for the Hamas movement, has said, "We're proud of the role of the Yemeni armed forces," which is the Houthi movement, in attacking Zionist ships or ships heading for the occupation. This is a great support for the Palestinian people in Gaza and is an important message to the Western coalition. Either you stop the war of extermination, otherwise you have to wait for the area of conflict to expand beyond Gaza. Let me just grab up something here just to show if you can see that on the screen. This is an image from Detresfa on Twitter, Damien Simon, indicating 17 maritime incidents in November, December 23. So over the last few months, actually over the last month and a half, 17 incidents here, reported drone attacks, the Galaxy Leader being boarded and hijacked, missile attacks, this type of thing. Now, this is where I've spoken about these in my last video on asymmetric warfare. These attacks conducted by the Houthis in this area are great examples of asymmetric warfare, where, for example, yesterday there's a report of a Houthi drone, perhaps a $25,000 Iranian-produced drone, sent towards one of the American warships in the area. It shot that drone down with a missile that costs between $1 and $2 million. So you can see here how, in terms of the economics of war, if the Houthis are able to get a bumblebee, a balsa wood glider with a grenade strapped onto it to approach an American asset, and they're forced to engage it and shoot it down, that for an now, of course, I'm sort of joking about that, but what I'm saying is, for incredibly small price, they're able to force the Americans to engage with highly expensive weaponry, $1-2 million missiles to engage something worth $25,000. Now, if you continue that over time, you're starting to deplete very expensive stocks to take out things which are reaching the bare minimum threshold of a threat to require them to be taken out. And you are adding to the US budgetary woes already. Now, right now, we've already got a roadblock for funding for Israel and Ukraine in Congress in America. The US Congress have now, the House of Representatives have retired for the year. The Senate may be returning next week to vote on this and may come to a conclusion where the senators will vote. This may be passed because the Democrats have a majority in the Senate, so they may be able to pass this funding bill for Israel and Ukraine, $64 billion for Ukraine and $16 billion for Israel, even if all of the Republicans vote against it. But it's not going to be passed in the House. At least it's not going to be passed in the House until next year at the earliest. So we have this challenge here with funding. Now, if you've got suddenly in the Red Sea, in the Mediterranean Sea, the Gulf here, your warships wasting millions of dollars a day to take out drones, which are costing the Houthis, maybe 25,000 a pop, less or more, something like that. Rapidly, this starts to again put pressure on the US in terms of its support of Israel. Lebanon, I might just go here. Lebanon, this is going to be a point of escalation now. I don't think this is going to stop and slow down. For the first time since the 2006 war, a Israeli airstrike has targeted a house in the town of Humin. Humin on the map here, this is up here. So this is the border of northern Israel with Lebanon. Humin, this is about 43 kilometers deep inside Lebanon. You can see Beirut is just here. Heavy airstrikes are ongoing overnight on southern Lebanon. There is video footage, if you go and look at some of the Telegram channels, showing heavy strikes around here, around Ras Nakura and Labne, around these areas around here. Remember that Hezbollah has its Radwan forces, the Radwan group of about 2,500. I guess you consider them to be special forces. Reportedly are down in what's an exclusion zone for them, which is anywhere from 30 kilometers north of the border. So they are reportedly in this area. There is an Israeli research center that has done an assessment and believes that those Radwan forces are ready to go. Hezbollah has over 100,000 rockets and guided missiles, and Hezbollah themselves indicate that those rockets and missiles can reach anywhere in Israel. And we have today Benjamin Netanyahu speaking and saying that on the situation of the northern borders, the Lebanon border primarily he's talking about here, it is clear that when we finish destroying Hamas, we cannot leave the northern borders as they are. We cannot end the war like this. We told the Americans this case must be solved politically or militarily, and we will solve it. We seek deterrence against Hezbollah in the north, whether through a political process or other means. So, with Benjamin Netanyahu speaking like this, with the continued assault on northern and southern Gaza, with continued attacks on Gaza hospitals, pushing down into the Gaza Strip, a population now of something like 2 million. Let's just zoom in a little bit here. 2 million people now being forced into this area just around here, sort of the Khan Yunis southern area, Rafah in this area here. Now, this is not a big area. From the border of Rafah to Khan Yunis is 8 and a bit kilometers. So there's 2 million people being squeezed into this area now. What is going to happen here? These next steps, I think this comes down to Benjamin Netanyahu. His decision on how to manage this from this point onwards will either lead to perhaps some miraculous diffusing of this situation and some sort of humanitarian result, stoppage with a ceasefire, and then some solution to these 2 million people now squeezed here who are going to find it difficult to return and inhabit what is left of northern Gaza. Or we are going to see that Hezbollah will engage one way or another, either through Israel provoking Hezbollah into starting a fight on the northern border, or Hezbollah just making that decision themselves and declaring war on Israel, on northern Israel. I don't know how this is going to proceed over the next few days, but it's certainly not de-escalating at this time. And the US is being led into this conflict by Israel, because if Hezbollah do engage, then the nature of this conflict changes dramatically. The ability that Hezbollah has to inflict damage on Israel is far above what Hamas in Gaza has been able, or has ever been able to do. Hamas in Gaza now, in their guerrilla type fighting here in Gaza, must be being pushed to their limits now. After 7 weeks of fighting, they have been cut off. They have been suffering a blockade where the amount of aid that was travelling into Gaza before October the 7th has been throttled back dramatically. So anything that the Hamas fighters had stockpiled in terms of medical and military supplies, that's all that they've got. They're not receiving any more. They can only last for so long like that before they will eventually reach a point where they will need to cease fighting. Now, I don't know what their stockpiles are. I don't know how long they can go on, but it won't be indefinitely. And if Israel continues to compress people down into the south of Gaza, if they go further and then begin to bomb in the southern parts of Gaza where those people are, then the global political outcry against Israel will grow, and this is going to put more and more pressure upon the US supporting them in this activity. If then if Hezbollah from Lebanon become engaged, Israel's put itself into a real position where it may end up battling Hezbollah with reduced US support, a position that Israel would not imagine themselves to be in, but it may be such that if Benjamin Netanyahu overplays his hand here in southern Gaza, that the US will find that it's not able to support to the level that it wanted to. It may find that even the Democratic House Republicans will not approve the $16 billion in funding that will assist Israel here. And America may reach a position where it's becoming very cautious about any further support if Iran begins to basically decide that it has had enough and is going to support Hamas and Hezbollah in the conflict. So let's see what happens. I think the next few days and weeks will be very interesting in this area. I will look to put together an update for Ukraine over the weekend, so just keep an eye out for that. It should come out in the next day or so. Hope you're having a great weekend. I look forward to talking to you soon.